Ladies and gentlemen, Chevron is gone. I don't mean Chevron as in the gas station. Don't worry, we're not losing any more of that yet. I mean Chevron as in Chevron deference. Now, for those of you who don't know what that is, I completely bear with you. I didn't really know what it was until I was talking to one of my friends about it, probably around last Christmas, but before that, I didn't really know what it was. So as a result of that, I'm just going to explain it really quick before I talk about why this is important and why it's a good thing that this case has finally been overturned. So let's go ahead and get started. For context, Chevron deference, or the legal case Chevron USA versus the Natural Resources Defense Council Incorporated, was a case in 1984 where the Supreme Court essentially decided that when a legislative delegation to an administrative agency on a particular issue or question is not explicit but rather implicit, a court may not substitute its own interpretation of the statute for a reasonable interpretation made by the administrative agency. Now, that's a lot of big political words, and my bad, that's just how I summarize things, but this is basically what it means. The courts weren't able to have the final ruling or interpretation when a federal administrative agency was involved. Then it would have to go back to the federal level. Now, this is why this wasn't good. Because there are probably some people out there who still think that we should let the federal government have the final say in everything. For those people, I'm just going to explain it to you really quick why this is not good. Honestly, attorney T.J. McCarrick describes it like this, and this is probably the best way that I can think of to describe it. He says, quote, "In sum, Chevron concentrates almost all government power in the administrative state, and by vesting agencies with authority to create, interpret, and enforce the law, individual liberty is placed at risk." End quote. In addition to that, it kind of violates a part of the United States Constitution. Because when you think about it, Section 1 of Article 3 of the U.S. Constitution says, quote, "The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court, and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish." End quote. Basically, Chevron deference undermines the power of the courts to have the final say in interpreting cases and laws in the USA, which is how it's supposed to be, but we've undermined the Constitution various times, and this is just one more like that. But we're not doing that anymore, at least not in this case. This is what happened today. According to a Reuters article from a few hours ago, quote, "The U.S. Supreme Court dealt a major blow to federal regulatory power by overturning a 1984 precedent that had given deference to the government agencies in interpreting laws that they administer. This handed a defeat to Joe Biden's administration. The justices ruled 6-3 to set aside lower court decisions against fishing companies that challenged a government-run program partly funded by industry that monitored overfishing of herring off New England's coast. It was powered by the Supreme Court's conservative majority that hemmed in the authority of the federal agencies." Now, later on in the article, it goes on to say, quote, "Chevron is overruled. Courts must exercise their independent judgment in deciding whether an agency has acted within its statutory authority." End quote. That's a quote from Chief Justice John Roberts. This is a good thing. Courts are finally able to actually have the final say in the interpretation of the law and the interpretation of what goes on within various legal cases in the United States. This is why case law is so fun and so important. If one of my friends is watching this, you're going to remember a discussion that we had last night, and that's just a little bit of a throwback for you. But here's the thing. Case law and interpretation of the law is extremely important, because think about it like this. You need someone who's going to interpret it that actually knows what they're talking about and has your best interest in mind. Do the courts always have our best interest in mind? No. Does the federal government? No, to an even farther extent. While we don't exactly have a perfect system for this, the system outlined in the Constitution is better than what we've been functioning off of. So I'm glad that we're finally getting back to actually sticking to it as it pertains to case law. I'm going to explain a little bit more of why this is a good thing. Like I already said, the court system can now fully do its job. This is taking us back to the US Constitution and to how we're actually supposed to run our country. If we can do it with this, if we could do it with Roe v. Wade, we can do it with other things. And that's something that I think is hopeful.